10-minute rule motion, Blake Stephenson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to make provision about the consideration of flooding risk in the planning process, to make internal drainage boards statutory consultees for certain planning decisions and for connected purposes. During this Parliament, we've heard a lot about the problems in the planning system. In particular, the government has spoken a lot about what it sees as the blockers, people who, for reasons this government seem not to understand, oppose developments they see as bad for their communities. Madam Deputy Speaker, this bill intends to help go some way to fix the government's problem. Because the reality is, the reason many people in our communities become blockers is that they have no faith that the planning system will deliver houses that make their lives better. These are hard-working people, Madam Deputy Speaker, and rather than listen to their concerns, the government has sought to bash them at every turn. One of the biggest problems in the planning system is the total failure of so many local authorities, and I refer members to my register of interest as a councillor, to properly understand and consider flood risk in new developments. That means that policy the government thinks ought to be sufficient to prevent, for example, development on floodplains in all but exceptional circumstances is being circumvented by developers. And without suitable expertise in planning, these developments are often going ahead without suitable drainage infrastructure to protect our communities from flooding. What does all of this mean, Madam Deputy Speaker? It means that for so many communities in mid-Bedfordshire and right across the country who've done the right thing, who've taken houses that the government wants them to take, those communities now find themselves with a higher flood risk, while developers have gotten away high and dry with their profits. And when they stand ankle deep in water in their once dry living rooms and desperately attempt to stop the next bad development making their situation worse, the Prime Minister calls them blockers. We're letting them down. And this isn't some hypothetical. It is happening in our communities in mid-Bedfordshire right now. Take the village of Malden. Malden has historically developed as a linear settlement running along the Greensand Ridge. But developers saw an opportunity to develop up the slope of the ridge. And that upslope development has caused a huge increase in flooding in Malden, to the point that homes that have stood for centuries with minimal flooding have now been reclassified by the Environment Agency as being within floodplain. Are the developers stopping there? Of course not. Another 40 hectares of land has been put forward for development around Malden as part of the call for sites for the next Central Bedfordshire local plan. Who gains from planning like this? It certainly isn't the hard-working people who already live in Malden, who saved up to buy the house that they've been dreaming of, and who wish to be able to peacefully enjoy it without having to worry about getting sandbags out every time grey clouds form overhead. It isn't the people who worked hard to get their new-build home in Malden, only to discover the planning system let them down and allowed developers to get away without building the right protections for their homes from flooding. It isn't the government who are left puzzled as to why all these people are opposing their plans to build thousands of more homes in our communities. The only people who gain are the big box developers who've thrown up the houses with minimal restrictions and mitigations and taken their profits, whilst our communities pay the price. And Malden is just one example. There are so many places in mid-Bedfordshire and across the country where our planning system has failed the people who need it most, the people we serve. That's what this bill will try to fix, Madam Deputy Speaker, starting by ensuring that where we have an internal drainage board, experts on flooding with flood management, that we take advantage of their expertise and make them a statutory consultee on development, which is likely to have an impact on flood risk in the broad area they cover. Many internal drainage boards are already contributing to this work by making representations on planning applications, but putting them on a statutory footing would ensure that their advice gets given the consideration it deserves, and it would cost us nothing. This bill will make a simple amendment to Schedule 4 of the Town and Country Planning Development Management Procedure England Order 2015 to insert internal drainage boards as a statutory consultee in the planning system. It will also ensure that we take the politics out of protecting people from flooding by ensuring that the Secretary of State may only remove internal drainage boards as a statutory consultee if they replace them with an alternative body who should provide advice on flooding risk. The Environment Agency already acts as a statutory consultee on planning matters which impact on floodplains, but they lack the resources to effectively and efficiently identify flooding risk more broadly. That is why internal drainage boards, where they exist, should be brought into the planning process to complement their role and ensure that proper consideration is being given to the flooding implications of developments for current and future residents. This bill would also ensure that planning authorities give appropriate weight to flood risk in the planning system, and that developers cannot get out of their obligations to build livable homes and not just their own profits. It would introduce a simple presumption against development where the lead local flood authority, the Environment Agency and/or the Internal Drainage Board consider that, when taking into account sustainable drainage infrastructure and flood mitigation measures, the development would increase flood risk for existing properties. It would require the Secretary of State to publish statutory guidance prepared by a panel of experts for planning authorities and lead local authorities on the minimum expected standards for drainage and maintenance in new developments. And it would build on recent government announcements on build-out rates and give planning authorities the ability to reject future planning applications from developers on the basis of past failures to deliver or maintain sustainable drainage infrastructure. Madam Deputy Speaker, we must do better for the hard-working people in our communities who want to return from work to a warm, dry home. It is the least they deserve. I present this bill for them.
Yeah. The question is that the Honourable Member have leave to bring in the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
David Simmons, Sir Roger Gale, Nick Timothy, Mr Gagan Mahindra, Dr Ben Spencer, Sarah Ball, Alison Griffiths, Jack Rankin, Rebecca Paul, Lewis Cocking, Paul Holmes and myself. Yeah.
Blake Stephenson.
Planning Flooding Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday the 11th of July.
Friday the 11th of July.